Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at something, well, pretty fascinating. A perspective that tries to connect big global shifts, even personal health, all through an underlying electrical reality.
Yeah, it's quite a framework the source lays out. Really makes you think differently about how things might be linked.
Absolutely. We've looked at a really unusual mix of sources for this deep dive, stuff that definitely challenges the standard ways we think about cells, society, even control.
Right. We're going to cover claims about a shift against what the source calls globalists, then dive into some really interesting science about the electrical nature of life itself.
And then this is where it gets really wild, how these different threads might actually come together, explaining everything from, say, how we heal to things. Well, the source uses the term mind control.
It's a big leap, definitely.
It is. So our mission for you, listening in, is to pull out the key nuggets here, try to connect these dots, the big picture societal stuff and the tiny world inside us, and basically give you a fast track to ideas that might just shift how you see things working. You ready?
Let's do it.
Okay, so starting off, the source makes this bold claim. An information tide is turning against these entities they call globalists, powerful international groups, individuals they see as pulling strings behind the scenes.
Yeah, and they argue that what we actually see in public is often like a complex stage play. That's the phrase they use.
A stage play. Okay, how do they back that up?
Well, they point to specific things. Like, remember Rand Paul going after Fauci? The source uses some pretty strong language, calls it a bitch slapping.
Wow, okay.
But then right away they say, hold on, both guys are corrupt, according to the source, and making money from the same big pharma companies. So the idea is Fauci was maybe a scapegoat.
And Paul was chosen because he wouldn't push too hard. Is that the implication?
That's what the source suggests, yeah.
Okay.
Because of those alleged shared interests. And then there's the WHO, the World Health Organization.
Right. What about them?
The source paints them as, a corrupt communist organization and points out they're now saying, don't boost, vaccine boosters.
Which, according to the source, is like cutting the knees off Big Pharma.
Yeah.
It could lead to more and more lawsuits, hurt their standing. They see this as good news after what they call 2 years of oppression by these globalist groups.
Interesting. And it's not just these huge global players you're looking at, right? They mentioned something local, too.
Yeah, quite local and pretty unsettling. Washington State. There was this administrative code, 246-100-040, subsection 070, from back in 2019. Not even a law, an administrative code.
Okay. And what did it do?
It basically allowed the local health department to say, okay, you or your group, you're a health risk, and then have them incarcerated.
Incarcerated. Based on a health department decision.
That's what the code allowed, according to the source. And it gets worse. There was a proposal to amend it to include kids as young as 5.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The source doesn't mince words, calls it a concentration camp law. But here's the flip side, the resistance part.
Right. What happened? Apparently, the Department of Health planned a public meeting about this amendment, but they got hit with thousands of emails opposing it. So many that they canceled the meeting. Shit-canned it, as the source puts it.
So direct public action had a real impact there.
Exactly. It demonstrates that pushback can work. And the source connects this to a broader idea that this kind of bad news hitting the normies, as they say, is making society kind of discombobulated.
Disoriented, maybe.
Yeah, disoriented. And this growing awareness, this resistance, it makes it harder for corrupt politicians to just stay in office. Their survival gets, ever so much more difficult. It really does raise that question, doesn't it? What happens when enough people do wake up to these things?
It leads right into this concept they mentioned, devolution. What does that mean in practice, according to them? How can people actually use that?
Well, the idea is power may be shifting away from the obvious government structures, and citizens can sort of reclaim it. The source describes this practice. They use emailing state legislators, their assistants too.
Using specific systems.
Yeah, they mention Voxuli and these legislator be advised newsletters, and the message is pretty direct. We're at war with the CCP, is what they tell them, and your votes could be seen as treason.
Whoa.
That's strong. It is. The goal is to plant a worm of doubt. It ties into their view. When the government fears the people, you have freedom.
And they bring up Kazakhstan, too, don't they?
Yeah.
Some kind of example.
Right. They argue it wasn't a typical color revolution. Instead, they claim it was the captured headquarters of the Illuminati, a big Freemasonry center.
Seriously.
That's the claim. And that the people there were taking care of business against their own state police, which they compare to the Stasi. So an internal uprising against this perceived hidden control.
Okay. It's a very different take on those events.
Definitely. And to kind of cap off this idea of people taking action when pushed, they use this metaphor, the lion story, referencing Christopher Walken.
The lion story.
Yeah, you know how even creatures that just want peace and quiet, people who just want to be left the fuck alone, as the source puts it, can become incredibly forceful, ready for confrontation when they're pushed too far. That tipping point idea again.
Right. The lion finally rousing itself. Okay.
Right.
So that's the sort of external societal power dynamic part. Now let's shift gears completely to the internal, this scientific concept from Michael Levin.
Yeah, this is fascinating. Levin's discovery, as the source presents it, is about an ionic cooperating electrical network among cells. They call it an electrical-based cellular network.
Okay, ionic electrical network among cells. How does that change how we should think about a cell?
Well, the old view, right, is cells are like these little hard shell objects, membranes letting stuff in and out. But this new perspective, it says cells are more like electrical states. Think less solid ball, more shimmering field of electrical chaos almost. The cell walls, in this view, aren't really continuous shells.
Not solid.
Not really. It's more about ions, charged particles like zinc, magnesium, calcium, iron, copper, constantly moving, being dynamically expressed through these boundaries. This whole process shapes the cell millisecond by millisecond by millisecond.
Wow.
Yeah, it's part of what the source calls millions of layers of this activity. They use the term Millona Distraati.
Millona Distraati. Okay, so it's this constant electrical dance. How does that translate into, well, cells doing things, cooperating?
Great question. The source gives examples, like different ions get expressed for different jobs, zinc for the immune system, maybe ferritin for muscle contraction, and there's this intelligence level they talk about.
Intelligence in cells.
Sort of, yeah. Cooperating with their neighbors, forming a broader cellular network, like tooth cells somehow knowing when to stop growing so the whole tooth has the right shape. They enforce constraints.
Okay, I think I follow. What about healing? Like a broken bone.
That's another example they use. A break creates a different electrical state, and that state signals the cells to start growing and fuse the bone back together. They even mention this failed experiment, trying to grow teeth using some kind of Hindu lattice. It failed, they say, because the cells didn't know to stop growing. The implication is something interfered with the electrical signals, the discharge.
So this cooperation happens on a massive scale then.
Exactly. From just a few cells up to thousands to millions to billions of cells cooperating. That's what makes up our bodies. And this Millona Distraati, these millions of layers of electrical activity, the source suggests this provides a scientific basis for concepts like life force, chi, ki, prana.
Okay. Connecting ancient concepts to modern science.
Right. It's suggesting that spirit is animating us through this dynamic interchange of electrical ions. You see these systemic cellular networks everywhere, eye cells talking to each other, liver cells coordinating. They know not to send signals to the wrong place, like your eye talking to your ear.
It's all about the network communication.
And the dynamism, that's key. It leads to these cascade effects, like how neurons fire. One thing triggers another, triggers another.
So the core idea here from the source is fundamentally we live in an electrical universe. Is that it?
That's the big claim. They even say if you can't explain something with electricity, your abstraction is wrong. This whole network view provides this extra layer of intelligence in the body, an electrically intelligent body.
Okay, if that's true, how does it show up in just everyday human experience?
Well, according to the source, things like Kundalini rising, blushing, getting that sudden big thrill of excitement.
Yeah.
Those are all dynamic expressions of ions changing in your body at a cellular level. They even go so far as to say all Enlightenment experiences are directly connected to these ionic shifts in our cells.
That's a really profound connection, linking mystical experience right back to cellular electricity.
It reframes a lot, doesn't it?
It really does. Which brings us to maybe the most provocative part. How does this electrical view connect to issues of control?
Right. This is where the source gets into claims about telepathy and, yes, mind control.
Okay, how would that even work, according to them?
The mechanism they propose is about manipulating those ions. If you could somehow change the ionic balances in the brain of the recipient, you wouldn't necessarily beam words into their head, but you could potentially induce an emotional response, a conclusion, an acknowledgement awareness.
Shift their state, basically.
Shift their state. Okay. Do they have any real-world examples?
They point to something interesting. Specific diets for prisoners. They claim these diets are used to calm them down, control behavior, and they frame this as a form of ionic control.
Even if the prison staff don't consciously think of it in electrical terms.
Exactly. The source suggests the effect is there, stemming from manipulating the prisoner's ion intake through diet, whether the mechanism is fully understood by the practitioners or not.
So, given all this, what can you, the listener, actually do if our state is potentially influenced by this electrical reality?
The source's main suggestion is actually pretty down to earth. Focus on optimal minerals, getting adequate amounts. They mention resources like orthomolecular.org for more info.
Okay, so good nutrition, essentially. Basically, yeah. The idea is if your body has the optimal resources, it's in an optimal state to resist unwanted influences, including this potential mind control.
Which leads to that really radical idea they put forward.
That diet should be a national security issue.
Yeah.
It connects personal health directly to broader vulnerabilities.
And they had that speculation about long skulls.
Oh, right. That was an interesting aside. They theorized that maybe individuals with elongated skulls could have enhanced telepathy or mind control abilities. The idea being more brain material might mean more capacity for electrical expression. Pure speculation, but it fits their framework.
It's definitely out there. What other examples do they give of these ionic dynamics in action?
Well, think about that classic fire shout in a crowded theater, how quickly everyone reacts. The source explains that instinctual, rapid response as stemming from swift ionic changes geared towards survival. Collective action triggered electrically.
Okay, that makes...
Or even just feeling drained, sagging after really intense exercise. That's linked to ion depletion, right? Which is why people reach for electrolyte.
Right, sports drinks and stuff.
Exactly. And then they make a more controversial claim that things like energy drinks and even psychotropic drugs like SSRIs, they argue these things directly fuck with the ions within the individual cells. Again, suggesting that even if doctors or companies don't fully grasp the deep electrical networking, they're not totally ignorant of the effect of the diet and the ions. They're manipulating the system, perhaps without full awareness of how electrically.
Which then leads them to ask about chemtrails.
Yeah, that's the next logical question in their view.
Yeah.
How are chemtrails fucking with our ions? If diet and drugs can affect our ionic balance, what about environmental factors?
It really expands the scope, doesn't it? This whole idea of a dynamic state. It's not just cells anymore. It's the social order, even the whole planet.
Right. And they even speculate that maybe our collective ionic balances have been affected by the strange energies from space. Just throwing that out there as part of the bigger picture.
So we've gone from global politics down to the cellular level and now potentially out to space energies affecting us. But this electrical understanding isn't just theory for the source, is it? It's actually inspiring some, well, ambitious projects.
Yeah, the speaker behind some of this material is apparently trying to apply these principles directly, trying to, as they put it, magnetize reality and invent a floating RV.
A floating RV. Okay, how?
They use an analogy, a submarine. Imagine instead of propellers, you create a magnetic field in the skin of the sub. Then you shoot electricity out into the water around it. The idea is to magnetize the water around you, essentially making the water itself push the sub along. No moving parts needed for propulsion itself.
Magnetize the water. Have they actually done anything like that?
They report some very early small-scale success, being able to make water react to magnets. They describe getting water molecules to clump together, aggregate, and then being able to drag them along with a magnet.
Drag water with a magnet?
Apparently so. They say it's very brief, needs a shitload of stuff, their words, but crucially, it's replicable. They see it as a huge breakthrough, proof of concept.
Okay. So if that works with water, the next step would be?
Air, right. If you could do the same thing to air molecules, then that floating RV suddenly seems, well, at least conceivable within their framework.
And they see this as a way to navigate, what was it, mind control.
Yeah, that's the connection they make. A way to potentially navigate, especially the mind control crap they believe is coming or already here. A vehicle less susceptible to certain kinds of interference, perhaps.
Wow. Okay. We have covered a huge amount of ground here. From, claims about global corruption and stage plays, right down to the electrical dance of our cells, and now floating RVs based on magnetizing water.
It's definitely a wide-ranging set of ideas, but the thread connecting it all, according to the source, is this dynamic, electrical, ionic reality.
So for you, the listener, grasping this electrical universe concept as the source presents it, potentially a new lens, right? A way to think critically about all the information coming at us.
Exactly. And maybe it offers some practical angles too, like that idea of optimizing your own dynamic potential, as they might put it, through things like optimal vitamins and optimal minerals, taking charge of your own state,
Right. Influencing your own ionic balance, perhaps.
perhaps. And building on that whole idea of dynamic processes, here's a final thought to chew on, something the source touches upon. All emotions, they suggest, are rooted in the fluids of our hormones. Therefore, emotion flows.
Like electricity flows or water flows.
Exactly. And like all dynamic processes, emotions must either grow or fade. They can't just sit still. Emotion, in this view, is not a stable state. It is a process.
A process of change.
Right. The observation of change affecting humans individually or collectively. Now, if that's true, what does it really mean for our personal lives, our collective experiences? Even for huge structures like, well, like religion. What are the implications if emotion itself is fundamentally a dynamic, flowing process, not a fixed state?